Without further ado, I will introduce our first guest, who is David Yang from CCIC Chicago. That's China's Certification and Inspection Group, experts in China. And he will be speaking to us today on recent changes in Chinese health food regulations, specifically some changes to dosage forms that are allowed. So I will turn the time over to you, David.
All right, well, thank you, Christine. Well, thank you, Rashida, and also CRN for providing this opportunity for CCIC to present in here. Like Christine introduced, my name is David, and I will talk about the recent draft for gummy and powder products and some other adjacent drafts since 2019. And at the end, I will share our thoughts about this drafts and some of the future directions of health food filing in China. In August 2018-2020, Chinese government agency, SAMR, they published a proposal rule regarding adding gummies and the powder into health product filing dosage. So this obviously is a draft, and the deadline for feedback has already ended in the end of the September. So this draft contains 4 documents. The first one is the technical requirement for health food filing formulation for gummy, and the second one is for the powder, and also 2 supporting documents. First is the regulation on allowed auxiliary materials usage for filing of health food products, and the last one is the dosage shape and the manufacturing process for filing of health food products. So in the next couple of slides, I will go through each document and explain some of the details of those. Next slide, please. So first, let's look at the technical requirement for a health food filing formulation of gummy. So in this document contains 4 contents. First, obviously, is to add gummy product into the filing system for vitamin and mineral products. And I will later explain the significance and the meaning of it. And the second is the drafted instruction requirement for gummy vitamin and mineral products. And then you have the technical requirement. And then lastly, you have the name requirement for it. Next slide. Next slide, thank you. So let's first look at the instruction requirement. So in this part, basically it says for the suggestion intended customers. So basically the consumer should be older than 4 years old, and you have a suggested serving size. And for the daily serving size is no more than 20 grams. And you have the serving message, which should be fully chewed before swallow. And also you have the caution and warnings. So you do not swallow, and also in here, it added for the consumers who are younger than 13 years old, and it should add a caution as like should be fully chewed under the adult supervision on the label. And then you have the physical weight, which is no more than 6 grams, and the shelf limit is no longer than 24 months. Next slide, please. So going on, let's talk about the technical requirement. So for the sensory testing specifications, so you have the color, smell, and the shape. So for the color and the smell, basically are based on the specific products, and the shape should meet just the general standard of the no deformations and no adhesion, the same size and the complete shape. And going on, you have the ingredient content tolerance and homogeneity. You have the metal indicators. So for those indicators such as lead and arsenic and mercury, they should follow the GB standard, which is the GB 2762 2017 version, as well as you have the national standard for food safety limits for contaminants in food. And then lastly, for the microbiological specifications, so you should follow the GB standard, which is GB 16740 and a 2014 version. So for the name requirement, first, you start with the trademark name, which is the company or the product name, and you goes on for the general name, whether your product contains 1 vitamins or multivitamins mixed with minerals, and then you end up with the gummy. Next slide. After the gummies, we have the technical requirement for the powders. So like the gummies, there's 4 parts, and the first is to add the powder into the filing system, and then you have the drafted instruction requirement, and then they follow the technical requirement and the name requirement. Next slide, please. So for the instruction requirement, it says for the intended consumers, it should be older than 6 years old, and for the serving size, and here is a little bit interesting. because on the past, the standard allowed auxiliary materials of and a usage regulation for health food filing products. The standard, it does not have the daily serving size for powder. So in here, this draft referenced the solid dosage serving size, which is no more than 20 gram. And then you have the dosage, which is no more than 500 gram per package. And then serving message should be dissolved in the water and other liquid before consumed. And then lastly, for the shelf limit, should be no longer than 24 months. Next slide, please. And then for the technical requirement, so for the color and smell, like gummies, are based on the specific products and the form, and it should be dry, loose, and evenly mixed, and of a uniform color. And then for the ingredient content, tolerance, and homogeneity, so the powder size should follow the guidance of the CHP, which is the pharmacopoeia of a PRC. And for the metal indicators, you should follow the same standard as the gummies, which is the GB 2762 2017 version, and as well as the national standard for food safety limits for contaminants in food. And for the microbiological specifications, you have the GB standard of 16740 2014, the same as the gummy standard. And also for the name requirement, you start with the trademark name, which company name, and the general name, and end with the powder. Next slide. So the next two documents to support this filing draft for gummies and the powder. And the first one is the regulation on allowed auxiliary materials usage for filing of health food products. So this document have a few categories. The first one is it listed the numbers of auxiliary materials that you can use for the dosage forms. So as we know, in the 2019, the updated version of auxiliary materials for health food is 196. But because now they're adding, thinking about adding gummies and powder in here. So basically, out of this 196 auxiliary materials, 152 will be allowed to use for gummies. And then we also know that there are the 25 auxiliary materials such as Arabic gum, the beeswax, or beta cyclodextrin, excuse me. They also share some of the pharmaceutical standard, but in here, SAMR, they make a very clear explanation that those 25 auxiliary materials, their pharmaceutical standard will be excluded. And then lastly, for the allowed materials and the amount of coating, you can refer to the GB standard 2760 2015 version, and the amount can be used as according to the product. Next slide. And then now let's look at the powders. So 172 out of the 196 auxiliary materials that can be used for powders, and also the 25 those auxiliary materials that will be excluded from the pharmaceutical standard. And if the product contains olive oil, you should refer to the standard of olive oil, which is the 243/47 2019. And also the Halo capsule should follow the standard of the pharmacopoeia of PRC 2020 edition. Next slide, please. And then the last document in this entire draft is the dosage shape and the manufacturing process for filing of health food products. So in this document, it says because there is like a, because SAMR will continue open raw ingredient for health food. So basically, the ingredients that can be used for the filings will not just be limited within the vitamins and the mineral products, but also include more function ingredients in the future. And also for the allowed dosage and the shape for vitamin and minerals. So as we can see that previously before this draft, there are only 5 materials that can be used for vitamins and mineral product filing. So now we can see expanded to 7 of them. And then lastly, this document also explained that the health food ingredient catalog will likely to increase in the future, and the dosage and the shape that can be filed will also be expanded accordingly. Next slide. And for the manufacturing part, for the gummies, this draft listed the GB standard 311/2014 as the reference standard. And the main step, such as, sugar melting, boiling, drying, coating, etc. And then for the powder, it refers to the pharmacopoeia of PRC, which is 2020 edition. And then some of the main step, I'm just listing here as some examples, like such as crushing, sifting, and dispensing the packaging. Next slide, please. So now I will go through some of the other important draft since 2019. I will just go through with them really quick and explain the importance of it. So the first one is the raw materials catalogs and the technical requirement for coenzyme Q10, fish oil, sporoderm, ganoderma powder, and spirulina and melatonin. So in this 2019 edition, it suggested the serving size and technical requirement and the sensory testings, and as well as the auxiliary material list for those 5 materials. Next slide, please. And in 2020, the SAMR published another draft of the same, this 5 products. So compared with the 2019 edition, there are some of the changes. The first is it added the required submission for a full inspection report, which means it's like very important because it's the first time for the health product. So during your filing application process, you have to submit the full inspection report of this the 5 products. And then, you also finalize the allowed auxiliary materials and for raw materials for each health product, as well as the manufacturing requirement for the powder. In here, it just sporoderm ganoderma powder. And the next slide. So the next draft is the health food ingredients catalog for nutrients and supplements. So in here, the important change is there used to be 22 nutrients that you can use for health food and their chemical compounds. So in this draft, it's added 1 more nutrients, which is beta carotene. That used to be under the vitamin A compound. Now it become an independent nutrients. Next slide. And then you have the allowed health food function claims for nutrients and supplement. So in here, the SAMR listed 15 health function claims and explanations. So basically, you can list it, those 15 function claims on your product, but you have to go word by word. You cannot modify any of those claims. Next slide. So basically, let's just do like a summary and overview of what we've talked about in the audit draft, previously. So the draft of adding gummies and powder into health food filing categories for vitamin and mineral products, from previously 5 to 7. Now, this clearly shows that China is expanding the categories and aim to bring more diversity into the market. In all the drafts I mentioned above, we're asking for opinions from the public, and this kind of clearly show that SAMR wants to engage with the public, health food industry professional and expert, and also shows that SAMR is willing to tailor the policy and regulations for the industry needs, which is like a good news. And then you have from the 2019 to this year. So we saw like a trend of making health food filing requirement more accessible. So I listed some of the drafts for raw materials, filing categories, and the function claim changes. So, and also considering that we understand that each country has a little bit different regulatory requirement, and also for raw material usage and the range, raw material use range and corresponding efficiency. So SAMR also does not rule out the possibility of approved filing or registration as long as there is a clear proof of efficiency that can be provided and demonstrated during the process, the filing and registration process. And at the same time, we also need to understand that all the changes of the pharma formulation and adding gummies and powder into the filing system are still limited within the vitamin and the mineral product. I mentioned in the previous slides that the draft for coenzyme Q10 and fish oil came was actually 2 drafts in 2019 and 2020. So there is a possibility that after SAMR review all the opinions from the public regarding the draft for gummies and the powders, there is a chance that it will publish another revised draft for more opinions. So now we just kind of waiting for SAMR to come up with the next step, what they're gonna do. So, I mean, overall, we see all the drafts published since 2019 as like a very positive indicator that Chinese government is looking to accelerate the filing application process and to modify its requirement. And also, there will be more draft and regulation coming in the future. We're just very excited, and we're very optimistic that this filing and the registration process for health product will be more accessible to other companies, and the process will be be much easier in the future. So for the next few slides, I will just give a quick overview of a filing and a registration of a health food in China. So next slide, please. So obviously, these are two key authorities dealing with the health food filing and registrations. You have the SAMR, like I mentioned earlier. So they're the one who's in charge of filing and the registrations. And also you have the GCC, which is the Chinese customs. So they'll be in charge of inspection when the product arrives to China. Next slide. And this is like a pyramid of a regulatory base. So from all the way from the top of the law and regulations, all the way to the bottom of the standards. So obviously the drafts we talk about today probably will be the regulatory rule changes. And if you want to look more details, you should refer to some of the GB standard I mentioned. Next slide. And this is just a quick, overflow of the filing and registrations from before and after import. And the next slide. And this is just a quick, overflow of the importing registration. So from the product screening all the way to acceptance validation to finally certificate that will get approved from SAMR. So this will be today's slides presentation. I mean, obviously at CCIC, we will also have a seminar about the details, going more further about the filing and the registration of health food in China in the future, and we also welcome you to participate. And thank you, Rashida.
I would encourage anybody with more detail to, of course, reach out to any of our friends at CCIC. And if you have questions on how to get in touch with them, we're more than happy to share, names and email addresses to many of our friends there. So anybody who wants to, maybe just quickly in the chat, that way I can see that you're asking a question. And so I'll give it maybe 10 seconds here to see if anybody does type. Yeah, question on access to the slides. Yes, yes, there will be access to those slides. I think they are, the slides in and of themselves are an amazing reference for folks that are thinking about China. But once again, you may also want to think about CCIC to get a little bit of further detail on those.